With companies granting more stock-based compensation than ever, here's what you should know about stock-based compensation. Stock-based compensation is also sometimes known as share-based compensation. So both of them have initials of SBC. So for the most part, they're pretty much used interchangeably. As an owner of a company, you need to hire employees to work for you. And what's very common is to pay an employee a salary. Alternatively, if you're in the growth stages of your company's growth and you cannot afford to pay high salaries, another option that a company may have is to offer stock-based compensation. So let me talk to you very briefly about what is stock-based compensation because it is not all formed exactly the same way. For the most part, there are three different types of stock-based or share-based compensation. First, a company can offer stock options. And what a stock option does is it gives employees the right to purchase a company stock in a future period at a price that is fixed at the date of the grant. The second way a company can compensate employees is through restricted stock units, or RSUs. And these RSUs are essentially stock-based units that are issued to employees through a vesting plan and distributed typically upon remaining with the employer for a particular period of time. And last are performance shares, or PSUs, which are more typically granted to executives. And performance shares are essentially stock-based units that are contingent on achieving a pre-established corporate goals over a period of time. So for example, you could have a EPS target that certain executives have to meet before they can get their PSUs. Or they might have to benchmark to other competitors and do better than competitors before they get access to these PSUs. So whether a company decides to pay a salary, issue stock-based compensation, or a combination of the two, both of these costs are considered expenses for the company and are both located on the income statement of the financial statements. So if you just look at a typical company, and I'll use PLBY, which is a stock I own, both salaries and stock-based compensation expenses are both included in SG&A, otherwise known as selling and general administrative expenses. So for most of my investing career, net income and price to earnings ratios were really the king metric that most companies were judged off of. And at the end of the day, most companies should be judged off whether they can make money or they can make money in the future. Because as owners, we give our money to the company in hopes that we get money in return. And you can't do that without having profits. Now, the reason why I'm making this video today is because through a lot of different conversations with people and looking at a lot of people comment on financial statements, they are so quick to discount stock-based compensation. And this isn't just with companies that I dislike, but even with companies that I like. This whole new measure of adjusted EBITDA with stock-based compensation immediately excluded is something that a lot of companies are now adapting to kind of show investors how they're doing as a company. Even when talking about cash flow statements, a lot of people will look at cash flow from operations, of which stock-based comp is excluded. Now, if you really think about what stock-based comp is, it's essentially an operating expense. Without stock-based compensation, which is another form of compensation to your employees, your alternative is to actually have to pay your employees more salary. And if you did pay more salary, those expenses would show up on the cash flow statements. So it's always important when you look at the cash flow statements to also take a glance at stock-based compensation, because that is an amount that the company would be paying out in cash without the absence of SBC. Now, stock-based compensation does not automatically dilute the company. Another alternative to how a company can pay out shares to the employees is they can actually use their cash pile and pay or buy shares on the open market. So whether a company ends up diluting or using its cash to make the employees whole from stock-based compensation, neither one of these are good if you are a shareholder of the company. I've seen people use cash flows and build out a whole discounted cash flow or DCF models and come up with pretty high valuations because stock-based compensation is excluded from cash that the company has paid out in the short term. A lot of growth companies are issuing tons and tons of stock-based compensation. In a lot of cases, more than 30% of their annual revenues are stock-based compensation. So if you don't account for stock-based compensation, then all of these companies are going to have inflated cash flows from operations. Now, the fact that a lot of companies, especially tech companies, are seeing their stock prices go down, we're going to see a situation where these companies that issue a lot of stock-based compensation are going to run into a lot of problems. Because without the absence of stock-based compensation, employees are going to demand a lot more money, or they will potentially leave these tech companies or companies that issue a lot of stock-based comp. So that's all I want to get off my chest today. Stock-based compensation is definitely one thing you have to watch out for. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.